from that Texans defense that already looks like they're being well coached, this is where I wanted to end things today. Watching the Bills defense on Sunday and contrasting that with watching the Broncos defense the week before, where the linebackers are truly lost. For 60 straight minutes, the off-ball linebackers for the Broncos are just in absolute hell playing that Dolphins team. And then you contrast that with what Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard and really the entire Bills defense looked like, dealing with all of those motions, all of the eye candy, all of the confusing elements of that Dolphins offense. So I wanted to ask you, as a quarterback, when you're studying a defense, when you flip on the film, the week is going, it's when do you first start preparing? Tuesday?
Like we'll start watching. I mean, we'll get a scouting report on Monday, but most quarterbacks are like, I need a day to just decompress. Yeah. So normally it's Tuesday morning, like 8 a.m.
All right. So Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. You flip on the first game you're going to watch the defense playing, whether it's situational, whether it's whatever game they just played, however you want to do it. What are the elements that you first notice when a defense is well coached? Like, what is the first thing on film that you can just point to and say, that's a well-coached defense?
That no one's open. That's like the first, that's the first thing. You think it's so easy, but it's true. Like when I'm first watching a defense, I'm trying to understand schematically, obviously, what they're doing, and not only what they're doing, but why they're doing it. Right. That's sort of how I grew as a player, is like, and then you look like after the first game, you get a feel for like what they do, and it matches up with the scouts numbers. Hey, they're 40% cover 2. Okay. What type of cover 2 are they playing? How are they playing it? 40% cover 3. Okay, what kind of cover 3? Weak rotation, strong rotation. What are they doing? And I don't really pay attention to that. I just like, man, like these guys are, there's not a lot open, and it can be like even receivers on the outside or seams on the inside. It just seems to me like well-coached defenses, and we're going to dive into a little bit more. But the throw against a maybe not so well-coached defense could be maybe a yard and a half of separation. Okay. And you can see that on film, like, okay, like I can fit this stick route in there between the linebackers. And then where you go to a very well-coached defense is they pattern match so well that it might be, instead of a yard and a half, it might be a half a yard of separation. You're like, oh, I don't think I'm going to take that there, right there. Oh, we better have really good schemes to scheme stuff to get open, because certain defenses just pattern match well. I think at the end of the day, that's exactly what I'm looking at the first couple games, is like, hey, how open are the guys? Like, and eventually if they're not open, like, okay, you keep watching, you're like, okay, like they're cohesive and they move as one, and they don't do a lot of stuff defensively, and it allows their guys to play fast. I think all of those things is what I look at when I look at a well-coached defense.
So describe pattern matching to people a little bit who may be a little bit more unfamiliar with it.
Yeah. So pattern matching, I mean, I've never really had to explain this, so just bear with me because I'm trying to explain to people that might not know. So pattern match pretty much is like, if you have certain patterns, say you have trips formation, and you have just for instance, the two inside guys run stick routes, which is just little 5-yard out routes, and the outside guy runs a go ball. Well, usually, like if I'm looking like, okay, hey, say you're in cover 2, nickel's inside leverage between 2 and 3, the mic is inside of number 3. Okay. You're in a cover 2 defense. And most of the times in cover 2 defense on non-well coached teams, the mic will just sort of turn, and the tight end and the trips formation, the inside most guy, is wide open. And the nickel will sort of slough off, and it won't be it. When I say pattern match, I'm like, they are knowing and they are seeing the quarterback take either a 1-step or a quickest 3-step drop they can. And they're saying, I don't need to be in Tampa 2. My Mike linebacker doesn't need to turn away and run out like it's some 7-step drop. No, they're reading the quarterback and they're seeing the vision. They're going from the quarterback to the tight end, and they're coming in for like, try to pick it off. Like it's not even wide open. Like that type of stuff is pattern match. And the best guy I've ever seen do it on stick routes, Eric Kendricks. When we used to play in Minnesota, I would tell guys all the time, do not throw a stick. I do not care what you do. Do not throw a stick route to him. And sure enough, he's picked. We played him in 2020. He picked off Matthew Stafford on a stick route. I'm like, come on, like what are we doing?
To my untrained eye, when I watch these teams, they're just never covering grass.
Yeah.
No one is ever covering grass. They understand situation, why the routes are distributed the way that they're distributed. So you're looking at like, it's a high-low, for example. I'm going to go back to the Bills game. So many different times they're trying to pin down the linebackers with either some of these sit down routes underneath or something flying to the flat. And the Bills understand, well, either based on down and distance or the way that this team is wired, they don't want to throw that. That exists solely for me to be in this spot. And then you see them getting way more depth than they might against another team. And there's never a moment where it's like, all right, well, why is this guy sitting in this huge patch of grass when all the routes are being distributed over there? So that's the first thing for me when I watch a team. It's like, is there a guy that's just standing with nothing else around him for 5 yards in either direction? And well-coached defenses, that never seems to be the case.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly, I mean, I gave the really like football 5-on-5. That was like 202. And that's honestly easier to understand. It's like, they're not just running to space. And so, and of course everyone coaches it, but you don't see a lot. I've always said, and we've always said it in football terms, is there's not a lot of air in the defense. Like that's what we would say. Like there's not a lot of air in the defense, meaning there's just not quite stuff open. And that's what well-coached defenses do. And I think it honestly, like it starts with how the guy who is installing the defense, how he coaches it. And usually it's the defensive coordinator. In this case, in say Texans, it's DeMeco Ryans. In this case, the Bills, it's Sean McDermott because he's calling the plays. And I think that is really interesting because some coaches are better teachers. Some coaches are better motivators. Some coaches are better with the team. There's just every coach is different. And so the teams I've always been a part of and always ended up worrying about was those teams who've had continuity, but they don't do a lot of stuff defensively because they're really, really good at what they do.
It feels like even if you're a team that just plays a lot of quarters or you play a lot of like two high coverages, it's mixed up. It's like, let's say you're a cover 6 team that like plays a decent amount of like weak rotation cover 3 or whatever. Even if you're only playing a couple different things, what I don't always understand, just because my football knowledge isn't to that level, is the individual details within those certain coverages. Like, yeah, you're playing a lot of quarters. You can play quarters a dozen different ways, right? And so when you're a defense or when you're an offense where you're a quarterback, there's really no understanding or knowing how they're going to play it on that specific play with the details that they've installed for that situation. And I think the teams that are really kind of honed in on those details as to like, all right, why am I doing this as the backside safety in quarters against this sort of look? And how am I going to play it? That really stands out. The Ravens are another team. That pick they had against Joe Burrow is just like, all right, this is perfect. Like he knows exactly what he's supposed to be doing as the backside quarter safety in this exact moment.
Well, and I said this in our production meeting, but I'll say it here is like, I always thought that the Seattle 3 defense, the vaunted Legion of Boom, when we were playing there a couple times against them, was the most simple defense I had ever set my mind on and seen on film. And so you're thinking to yourself, like, how are they not giving up way more yards? Well, most defenses will practice, the certain plays of the week that say they're the Seattle Legion of Boom is playing the Saints. And so they'll practice the whole playbook of the Saints and they'll continue to walk through it against cover 3, cover 4, whatever they're doing. Man, they might play third down. But what Seattle did, which I thought was really interesting, is they would, of course, walk through those plays that the Saints would have. But then they would just do a period or two where, hey, we're going to work on every sort of play that hurts our style of defense because we only play one style and teams are going to scheme it up. So they might not run it this game, but we're going to have a vast understanding and information of what works. I always thought that was the coolest thing in the world.
Any other units from your career that you remember just flipping on the tape and being like, this is going to be a problem. Like this is going to be a hard week where immediately it was apparent to you that it was a well-coached team you were playing against?
Yeah, 2 stand out for me without a doubt. It's Mike Zimmer when he was with the Vikings, and because of their pressure package, and because of they were just a quarters shell team, but they could play cover 2 out of it. They could play quarter half. Very rarely were they in single high, so it was really well coached. But then you get to third down, it's that 8-up package. It's that double A mug, 2 guys on the side, Harrison Smith. That was always probably the most mentally taxing week of my career every time we played them, because it's like, oh gosh, you got to get ready for double A mug, and there were so many protection rules that you had to like work with. was a pain in the ass. And the second one was Vic Fangio, and I was with Vic in Chicago in 2017. And he didn't do a lot. Like probably over the course of his career, we'd have to look this up, but probably the least amount of pressure any defensive coordinator has ever brought. Like this dude just doesn't believe in pressure. But what he would do is he would play this quarters like defense, and he would always like cloud the passing strings, play quarters away, and that quarters safety on the backside away from passing string was always ended up robbing over top, almost like a cover 2 safety. So it was like this weird like coverage. Like if you didn't have an X receiver, your single receiver out of trip side, or a halfback that was really good out of the backfield, like you'd be in for a long day, because there'd be 5-on-3 front side every single snap, no matter how you do it. And they'd be good enough up front to stop the run. So those two come back as like, those are probably the toughest weeks to prepare.
Think about all those Eddie Jackson pick sixes from that 2018 season, or all those Eddie Jackson interceptions where he's just sitting there. I mean, and you can envision it.
He's like fair catching. He's like, oh, throw it to me. And sure enough, Jared Goff, that 3 interception game, just kept throwing it to him.